It is now November 2017. 2 years ago, give or take a month or two, I moved into this apartment. For the year before that, I was living in this transitional house with a few other men, so that will give you a pretty complete picture of what the last 3 years of my life have been like, shelter-wise. Before that, I was homeless. I don't know quite off the top of my head just how long a period it was, but I was homeless. I did not look homeless, though. My appearance was not by any means fancy, but I did not look homeless. I looked like a trucker or a logger. I looked blue collar. One day, I was on the bus. It will not seem relevant to my story at first, but when I first got on the bus, there was only one other passenger, and I joked with the driver. I said, "Gosh, I sure hope I can find a place to sit." We had a chuckle, and I sat right up front. I probably would have sat further back if I had known that a few stops later, someone mobily handicapped would be getting on. Before that happened, the passengers from several stops filled several seats on the bus. And then, when the fellow with the wheelchair came on board, I recognized his need and moved back, figuring that he would probably need someone to fold up the seat I was using. The seat I moved to was on the same side, right at the back. The only seat further back was the one across the back of the bus, and there was only one passenger there. I then made the mistake of setting both my bags behind me. I call this a mistake because one of them contained my computer. Now, this would not have been a mistake if my computer had only been a set of software and hardware. Software and hardware nowadays are not especially expensive for my ends, and though rent is rather expensive in my location, most everything else is pretty cheap, if one has a steady income, which I do. I then compounded that mistake by spending my entire ride looking forward. I do not remember exactly why I spent the entire time looking forward. Maybe I was just determined not to miss my stop. But eventually my stop came up, and I rang the bell and reached back to grab my bags. One of them was missing. In one of the worst moments of uncertainty I've had in the last several years, I picked up the other one and trudged toward the front of the bus. And just as I reached the seat where I had been sitting before, I stopped and declared, "I had 2 bags when I got on the bus. One is missing." Now, longtime subscribers of mine will remember the playlist of logical fallacies I was working on. One reason I was studying logical fallacies with such intimacy and taking such an interest in them was just how pissed off I was at myself for all the times I had failed to carry out the most ridiculously simple feats of reasoning. This was one such instance. The driver set the parking brake on the bus and came back, pressuring me to accept that I had probably not actually had it when I got on. This compounded my uncertainty as I looked around the bus. The passenger sitting in the corner, right beside where I had been, was wearing a hood and a pair of dark glasses. He swore stoically that when I got on board, I had had only one bag. It embarrasses me to admit that, as smart as I am, in this environment, I abandoned reason, took my remaining bag, and got off the bus. And the bus drove away with my computer on it. As I was walking down the street, I connected the few dots I had and had one of the most astonishing and embarrassing revelations I've ever experienced. That passenger was the one who had made my computer disappear, and I had just let him get away with it. Remember when I first got on the bus and there was only one passenger? It was not him. Therefore, this guy got on the bus after I did, and therefore had no way to know what I had had when I got on the bus. Furthermore, this guy was sitting in the rear right corner, while the passenger I had spotted was sitting in the rear left corner. Now, as I say, a computer, even for a guy who was homeless at the time, is not a big loss if that guy has a fairly generous stream of revenue, which I had. Sure, I find myself wishing it were greater every time I see a story in the news about how, yet again, the rent in this location is just slightly inching upward, but that's a subject I will be getting into in another video. The loss is what I had put on that computer. Remember my novel? I once wrote a novel expounding on the concept of the multiverse. That I had the sense to back up. In fact, that I still have. In fact, I'm toying with the idea of adding to it. But I wrote notes in preparation for that novel. I wrote notes about the setting and all the characters that I used in that novel. In fact, I used those characters, but there are traits that I did not use, that I did not reveal, that I was planning to reveal later. And of course, it's really embarrassing that as smart as I am, I should make such a monumental mistake. I can tell you exactly who it was, but he's long gone now. I called the bus company, planning to see what I could do. They told me that the bus would be returning to that particular stop in a little more than an hour. So apparently, the best I can hope for is that this guy is going to somehow forget that he has my computer and leave it on the bus. So what could I do except absorb the loss and weather the embarrassment?